Hey guys, it's Coco One Love here. We're talking about the Russian swing today. Russian swing is the first video in the extension of our strength series. The swing actually continues what we learned from the deadlift, but adds a little bit more speed to the movement of the hip hinge. So with the kettlebell swing, what we're looking at is the hip hinge. We're looking at midline stabilization, and we're looking at stabilizing the shoulder. Now when we're talking about stabilizing the shoulder, what we want to see is our shoulder being pulled back and down, but more importantly what we're thinking about is our shoulder blades being pulled together and then being pulled down our back towards our butt and away from our ears. So with the kettlebell setup, the Russian swing, what we want to do is we want to have a nice wide base here, either shoulder width or a little bit wider. We're always prioritizing a straight foot because of what it does for our arches and the stability that it creates and power that it creates in our hips. We're working with the hip hinge here. So whenever we work with an exercise that is a hip hinge exercise, we want to see that our butt is being thrown to the opposite wall or the opposite direction. Our hamstrings and our glutes are being pushed away to the opposite direction. And then what we want to see is that our shin remains vertical. If we see that our knee comes forward or our butt drops down, what that's going to indicate is that we are squatting. And we don't want to squat in a hip hinge movement. Okay? And then what we want to focus on is creating stability in our shoulders. And when we want to create a stability in shoulders, like we said, we're pulling our shoulders back and down. And the cue I'm going to give you here is that I want you to imagine that you have a $100 bill in between your armpit, this armpit, and another $100 bill in between this armpit. And we want to keep those secure and tight to our bodies. We don't want to let those fly away. And so what that's creating is a stable shoulder by letting us squeeze that armpit, keeping that shoulder back and down, and our arm is allowed to move, our elbow is allowed to bend, but we're not generating any power, we're not cranking or pulling on the kettlebell with our shoulder or our arm. The hip hinge and the hip extension is what's energizing and what's creating the power for this movement and what's driving this movement the whole time. Okay? So we're not allowing our arm to do any of the work. The arm is just allowing for the movement to continue and is also keeping grip on the kettlebell so it doesn't fly away. Okay? So we set up here, nice wide base, feet straight. We're going to go through the bracing sequence to prioritize midline stabilization. Squeeze our glutes, bring our rib cage down, abdomen nice and tight. We're going to initiate by hinging through the hips. And as you see, the kettlebell is in front of me. The reason why the kettlebell is in front of me is because it's going to allow me to initiate the movement a little bit more efficiently. When I stand up, the kettlebell will automatically swing back, and I will be responsible for the hip extension to actually bring the kettlebell up. It's just a little bit more efficient way to get started than to deadlift it up and then try to kind of rock into a swing. Okay? Here we go. Hinging through the hips. As you notice, my spine is nice and flat. My abs are still pulled in tight, maintaining a nice flat spine, straight spine. My feet are going to remain flat throughout the movement. My heels are going to stay down throughout the movement on the ground, the whole movement. Okay? I reach for the kettlebell here. I pull my shoulder blades together and shoulder blades down, or my shoulders back and down, and I'm going to initiate the movement here. As you notice, my breath is in sync with the movement. I'm coming to full extension and not overextending, where I lean backwards. My shoulders are staying drawn back and down. My armpits are locked in. and I'm allowing the kettlebell to float, my arm is allowed to move, but my shoulder is remaining stable. And my gaze of my eyes is actually following the hinge. So my spine moves forward, the gaze of my eyes is forward. When I extend, the gaze of my eyes is forward. I don't let my neck crank up. I don't want my neck to crank down. Sideways, sideways, no. I want to keep my gaze nice and straight throughout the movement, so that when I'm moving through the movement, the hinge, and I see it. Yeah? That way we're protecting our spine. Alright, that was the Russian swing, our first video in our extended strength series. Play around with that. It's a little bit more dynamic movement than the deadlift because it adds a lot more speed. If you're having trouble with this, backtrack, work on your deadlift, then come back to this. Make sure everything is functioning the right way. We're hinging through the hips. We're always prioritizing our midline, and our shoulders are staying set. We're working on shoulder stabilization. Coco One Love. Like us, subscribe, and share us with the world. Conquer a lion. Peace out, baby. We'll see you soon.